Hey folks, okay, so people tell me things, they give me messages in the comment section of my videos, and I have to take it at face value. I have to say, okay, well, I can't assume you're lying, but if you say something that contradicts what I see, then I have doubts. Okay, so not this happens multiple times, so I'm not going to pick on any one person, any one genre of people. But, for example, I've talked about various martial art styles and training methods out there, and one thing I run into repeatedly is I think we owe this to when the Okinawans began teaching karate in public and eventually taught the Japanese. And to be honest with you, many Okinawans had learned karate. Maybe they hadn't learned very deeply. They didn't know why certain things were being done a certain way. They didn't know what techniques were for. We know now you have Kyushu and Tuate, and you have all sorts of joint locking, joint breaking, pressure point, takedown, counter grappling techniques within karate, within the forms, and of course, same in kung fu. But it's esoteric. Not a lot of people are taught it for whatever reason. Some good, some bad. Then later they teach it to the Japanese, who many of them had prejudices against the Okinawans and vice versa. Later on, a third of the population of Okinawa gets killed during the Battle of Okinawa, and a bunch of big Americans show up and they're like, hey, teach me karate. A lot was withheld, right? So if you don't know the why things are done, I think Jesse Ankam said this. If you don't know the meaning, the bunkai, the application of something, you focus on the performance. He called it the how, right? Makes sense to me. I don't know if he invented that. He probably learned it from someone else. So you get a lot of bunkai, application of techniques that involve a step through thrusting punch, a lunge punch, right? Not the most useful technique in the world, folks. I know I've heard people defend it. It's not the most useful thing. Can we say that? If you square back in a front stance and step through with a punch, you're not really simulating much. What you're doing is you're sort of giving your partner a very big, dumb, telegraphic punch to respond to with your exaggerated movements and your, you know, not that practical application. And so what happens is karate was one of the first really popular arts to get distributed, in terms of striking from the Orient. Judo was first, hands down. Judo, jujitsu, and the terms were often used interchangeably. Um, so it became a popular training method, and these arts go to Western countries, and so you're learning kind of a modification of a modification of a modification by the time it gets here to America, and you have this training method which people are introduced to, and so they're like, well, I want to make these arts more realistic, and because they kind of don't understand, were never taught by people who were never taught by people who were never taught some of the actual principles of dissecting analysis and meaning from these forms and techniques. They turned it into uh, more of a distance art and kickboxing type of thing, and it evolved in different directions. So, in the attempt to make this stuff more realistic and work, because America's a violent country, always has been a really violent country. Violence is very controlled in Okinawa and Japan. Always has been, right? The cultures are more homogenous. There's less racial conflict because there's less racial variety, and the society stresses conformity and order, and more so than ours, especially in the time when it was transmitted. We're talking the 40s through the 60s, 70s. So yeah. So the upshot is there's a lot of American karate styles and jujitsu styles. Taekwondo styles and Kung Fu styles that have these fabulous techniques done on step through punches, lunge punches, um, which, you know, if you take a beginner who knows almost nothing and someone starts doing a lunge through step punch at them, at some point they're going to flinch or move or whatever and avoid that punch. It doesn't require a lot of training. It's more like giving someone a wooden dummy or a striking target when you don't have the equipment than it is kind of a viable sparring method, right? Someone's going to argue with me. Well, they're going to try to argue with me. I'm just going to get them out of the comments because I'm not trying to talk to people that could pretty much start a fight in an empty room trying to argue for something that nobody in their right mind would argue for, right? So, so I make a comment about different things I see, and I've said it on several martial methods. It seems like the level of resistance you get in X style and Y style and Z style is just a lot of step through punches and fantastic techniques being done, but person throwing the punch out, locking it out, standing perfectly still while you do your things. The age of MMA, folks. We kind of know that's not realistic training, right? Um, and so people are like, well, that's what we do at first, and later we introduce quote more realistic attacks quote, and I just have to take it at your word. I have to say I can't assume you're lying or delusional. I'm going to be like, okay, you must do it behind closed doors. Cool. A lot goes on behind closed doors. Now, here's my problem though. I've been watching YouTube since it first came out. Many of us have. And one of the first things I did was I'm like, ooh, martial art videos. Fantastic. And I'm like, ooh, this style. Ooh, this style. Ooh, that style. I've seen them in the magazines. I've seen them in a little clip in a documentary. But like my first year on YouTube, I watched hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of hours of these styles that I had only read about in magazines or barely glimpsed in a demonstration or on a documentary and on TV for like 2 minutes. And I have watched, and as time goes by, people upload stuff that was recorded in the 70s, in the 60s, in the 50s, right? So I have, over time, I have seen 30 or 40 years of the evolution of a particular style, right? It's almost like a time machine journeying back in time because first people were posting a lot of their most current stuff, and then they're like, oh, by the way, this is last year's tournament, this is last year's demonstration, this is. Then people started posting whole classes and seminars and then historical things, you can watch JKA footage from the 50s now, 60s. You can watch the evolution of men like Takayuki Mikami. Actually, not him. I don't see a lot of him, but definitely a lot of Hirokazu Kanazawa, right? You can watch, all old Bruce Lee footage, Moses Powell. You can watch Professor V. You can watch Bill Wallace teaching in France, teaching in Italy, competing in the 60s in point, and then full contact 70s and 80s. And, you watch Jean-Yves Terrio's first kickboxing match and watch him get knocked out, I think by Blinky Rodriguez. And then you can watch the evolution of Jean-Yves Terrio, a fighter I really admired, all the way through. Later, he's retired and teaching seminars, right? And so I've got to assume that those individuals, those styles that now have thousands upon thousands of hours of video footage over decades posted, I've got to assume that they're not shy about showing what they do in their training methods. I've seen entire classes, I've seen beginning to end seminars. Where is it? Where is it? I see some people talk about the realism of their style, and what I've seen is tons and tons of prearranged sparring and self-defense. I've seen some non-contact sparring without equipment or with equipment. I've seen, some two-person routines, forms, weapons. I've seen that. And these people saying that, well, we really do practice against more realistic attacks. Some styles of karate, for example, that talk about, well, we do a lot more than one-step sparring and non-contact sparring. We do realistic self-defense training. It could be like a Japanese karate ryu or an American karate ryu. I'm not seeing you people defend against one jab cross hook, jab cross uppercut, very common attack. I'm not seeing a lot of work on someone defending against a simple tackle or a double leg takedown that has, some energy behind it, some intent, right? And some of you have posted stuff over 30 years, 40 years. I'm not seeing it. Your demonstrations and your classes and your seminars that you have posted over the course. Now, you're showing me what your styles, many of you, what your styles look like back in the 60s, all the way up till now, an unbroken chain of teaching. And I'm not seeing it. I'm not seeing it, right? It seems like you got free sparring. And in free sparring, you're using, martial art techniques against each other. You're using your own techniques against each other. And oftentimes, many of these techniques are not what you'll encounter, what the threat level has been. I know violence has evolved too in our society from the 60s to now, right? And the only update I've seen is, quite a few schools have been like, we're not going to do forms anymore. Screw the ancient weapons. We're just going to practice on equipment and, things like Krav Maga and kickboxing and, people that want a lot of like rough, hard training kind of graduating more towards Muay Thai or MMA. Um, I've taught privately and group classes over the years, and I've multiple styles, and the masters and headmasters and school owners and whatnot, they'd be like, why are you teaching them how to box and defend against boxing? I'm like, well, that's what they're going to encounter. Yeah, but it confuses them, or hey, you can't be teaching tackle defenses or those takedown defenses. A lot of these kids and adults, they don't like falling. I'm like, well, I'm teaching them how to fall. No, you're taking up too much class time. You're distracting them from what we're trying to teach. So you encounter that. What I'm saying is, if if you're willing to tell me and I'm willing to believe you, can you don't send links to me? Like, you all have web pages, right? So post it on your web page. I browse all sorts of martial arts related material. I would love if the people that claim to have effective martial arts would post footage of them. Here's a drill where the attacker throws a double jab and then throws a body shot. Here's a drill where someone does a leg kick that moves in with his hands. Because I browsed your web pages all the time and I haven't seen it, and I want to believe you. I truly want to believe, and you got to give me something to believe in. Okay, give me something to believe in, and I will advertise it on my video. I'll respond to it. I'll be like, look, here is a traditional karate ryu. Here's a traditional taekwondo school. Who, by the way, their self-defense training is pretty cool too. They found a way to apply their techniques by training against realistic attacks. And like I know the ATA at one point, like everybody was learning Krav Maga, and I'm like, but you've already got a martial art style. Can't you just train it, right? Anyway, What I'm saying is, okay, I believe you. Put it on your channel. Thank you.